Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube. And here is the very first Album of the Week episode for the new year of 2021. And it's episode number 94. So 94 episodes in. So what did I choose to spotlight for the first Album of the Week episode of the new year? What is for at least this return here? What album did I choose? I mean, you can already tell by the title anyways. But originally, last week it was supposed to have been Back, and the album I was going to originally pick, and again, this would have been for last week, was going to be Moving Pictures from Rush. However, the anniversary date, I took another recheck for that album, at least for the release date of it, was wrong, and I pretty much pushed it back to a few other months. But at the same time, is that really a big deal? Other than you'll know that eventually I will be spotlighting Moving Pictures on this channel. But instead, since this right here would be the second Album of the Week episode of the new year, instead it's now the first one. And for you'd be thinking, why would you pick this album, let alone pick this for at least a Nasty Metal Productions Album of the Week, because of this band is not even a metal band to begin with. And I'll elaborate a bit more on that. But also you'd be thinking, but why would you even pick this one as at least the first new episode for the new year? Again, I'll elaborate, but what it is the debut full-length album from probably definitely these guys are at least legendary in many ways, and classic. Every bit of word you can use to describe this band, they pretty much are. Again, one of the most definitely one of the best classic rock bands that come out of Texas. That's the debut album from ZZ Top. It is ZZ Top's first album, which was originally released on January 16th of 1971. Therefore, it has already reached, and by the time I'm recording this, it has reached its 50th anniversary. So those are other reasons why I definitely felt like spotlighting this, besides the fact, since I'll finally elaborate on why I chose this, is because this band, just like any other band, like either, let's say, AC/DC for example, or any other sort of classic 70s rock band, ZZ Top was definitely one of those that really definitely for sure was kind of a gateway band. They definitely, I was into them early on, though I got more exposed to their stuff. Like, again, for example, Recycler was actually the very first ZZ Top album I ever heard, if you can believe that. That's one of the reasons why that album is actually at least close to my heart. Even if it isn't the best thing they had ever released. I mean, this album is also arguable whether or not this would be their best release, but compared to Recycler, I think this one has more a lot more better responses towards this one, because again, this is a period of the band that for a lot of people who definitely grew up in at least the 1970s and were into a lot of the heavier or more harder rock and stuff, this album at least is more close to their heart. I mean, when this album was released, everyone was into, at this point, Black Sabbath. And even the Blue Oyster Cult, I think a year later they would. But again, same thing with them. But Mountain and Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, and maybe Budgie, depending on the European market. And of course, speaking of the European market, it should definitely be no secret that since for anyone who's big fans of Motorhead would know that Lemmy definitely cited ZZ Top as one of his most favorite bands. Definitely why Motorhead would cover Beer Drinkers and Hellraiser for at least the one of their EPs in the late 70s. So there's just so many reasons why why I definitely would choose to at least spotlight an album from these guys. And again, it seemed fitting since this album has definitely been reached its 50th anniversary. It just made it easier for me to finally talk about this album. Because I think this is a great album from these guys, and for a debut album, this surely is, I would say, is up there as one of the best debut albums. Again, it's also one of the albums I definitely pull out for most of my ZZ Top jams. But again, I can go on and on about at least the historic importance for ZZ Top, but for right now, let's definitely move on to at least just talk about a bit of the back history for at least the album. I mean, prior to ZZ Top, Billy Gibbons did have a band originally in like the late 60s called Moving Sidewalks, and they had at least one album out, and I think it was in 1969. But that definitely laid at least the blueprints and plenty of the building blocks that would lead into this here, the very first ZZ Top album, because after that, you would definitely meet up with band members such as Dusty Hill and Frank Beard to basically form this three-piece Texas blue, a very guitar-driven blues-based quartet. And what we get here, and again, this album, of course, was recorded at least sometime in 1970, but again, being released on January 16th of 1971, and of course, being produced by Bill Ham, who would, from this album and thereon, would produce the majority of ZZ Top's albums throughout the 70s and even into the 80s. And he just, and even I think into the early 90s, he really stayed with this band a lot. And in many ways, you almost can credit him as the unofficial fourth member, because it seemed like he was just an integral part of this band. So that's definitely one of the other sort of, at least in many ways, interesting just really historic factors that play into this album. But from here, just what we get here is at least 10 songs of just straight up no BS, just nothing fancy, just straight up, just down to earth, very, very at times heavy, but still just great, honest, just heavy guitar driven blues rock is what we get with this album. Again, 10 songs, right from, of course, again, it's 10 songs, and it all clocks in at 35 minutes and 16 seconds, but these 10 songs are, of course, Somebody Else Been, Shaking Your Tree, Brown Sugar, Skank, Going Down to Mexico, Old Man, Neighbor Neighbor, Certified Blues, Bedroom Thing, Just Got Back from Babies, and Backdoor Love Affair. And within these 10 songs, now the first time I was actually at least exposed to this album, or at least any of their early output, was, I think it was that compilation that was, was it 4 CDs? I think it was 4 CDs, but it was it 4 or 5? I can't remember how many discs it was. It was released in, I think, the late 80s, early 90s, and it was titled Six Pack. And it was pretty much at least the band's 70s output, though minus Tejas. That was, I think, the only album that was, I believe, actually, you know what, I think that might have been on there. I can't remember. For some reason, that album just seems to definitely get overlooked. But I can't remember if that was on there or not. But I know for sure it, after that, again, I don't know about Deguelo. I think that one was also off there, too. I think what was, again, it went through at least the first album here, Rio Grande Mud, Tres Hombres, and Fandango, and then El Loco. I can't remember if Tejas was included in that set. But the thing is, with that set, and why I have to bring it up is because it is very infamous for the fact that those albums there were all remixed and at times partially re-recorded, and it was to at least, because since at that point a lot of people that began to really get exposed to ZZ Top was with albums like Eliminator, and Eliminator being one of the first albums alongside even Def Leppard's Pyromania of being mostly digitally recorded, where even and in many ways it was state of the art for its time period, because they were testing out new technology to at least record at least musical tracks. And I think ZZ Top along with Def Leppard were the first two rock bands to actually at least use a drum synthesizer or drum machine, or just computerized drums. And the whole thing just sounded a lot more processed. And that was one of the big things, and it's in many ways it got them over, and it definitely, and it made them a whole lot of money, and it created a whole new fan base. Basically, it made them a whole new fan base. And so when it came to the time of probably introducing this new audience to their early material, they thought it was the label thought it was a great idea. Basically, the label speaking would be Warner Brothers. They thought it would have been a great idea to remix and re-record the albums and make them sound like they had been recorded in the 1980s. And that ended up being the biggest no-no and the biggest mistake you can make. Because for the old-time fans who at least followed this band from this album, or even Tres Hombres or Rio Grande Mud, again, that loved those early albums, that grew up with them at that point when they were looking to upgrade their collection onto CD. To them, that sounded like a great idea, but what they got was something that met with angry fan base. It was met with just a very angry response to where it almost, I think it kind of, with their older fan base, if anyone that thought that an album like either Eliminator or Afterburner or even Recycler kind of tainted the fan base, I think Warner Brothers remixing those early albums to make them sound like albums like Eliminator and Afterburner and Recycler. Though I don't know if I can throw Recycle in there, because of hopefully at one point I probably could at least spotlight that album so I can at least talk about it, because I've got some fond memories for that one. But still, I know that sounds kind of biased on my part. Still though, with at least Eliminator and Recycler, if those albums didn't to make them sound like those two albums I was about to say, that just was what probably killed most of the fan base for at least ZZ Top. That probably is what killed it for at least the older fan base, the ones that grew up with them from this album. And so for years, to get a copy of the earlier albums in their at least all preserved in their original state, being again the original authentic mixes of the album. The only way anybody was ever to at least get those albums in their original authentic form would have been on vinyl. But many decades later, Warner Brothers, or I think it was Warner Brothers, I think it was them, decided it was time to do a 10-disc box set. And for that box set, I mean, prior to that, Rhino Records was definitely had at least reissued Tres Hombres and Fandango for the first time with their original mixes, but they didn't though decide to do like the first album and Rio Grande Mud and Tejas. They didn't do the treatment for those three albums, and instead they never reissued those. So for the 10-disc box set, Warner Brothers decided it was a great opportunity to finally give the fans what they wanted, and that's finally for that box set, finally to reissue the first album, Rio Grande Mud and Tejas, in their original form, with the original mixes reinstated, and with at least some sort of upgraded mastering, but still it will be the first time that those albums would be at least reissued with their original mixes. And I think since then has been the case. So I think for most of the reissues now on CD, either Japanese reissues, I think all at least revert back to the original mix. But this is actually how I really got re-familiar with the first album from ZZ Top, was with that box set, because I had purchased that, and then I was finally to really hear some of these early albums in the way that they were meant to be listened to, and years being at least, to be quite honest, I forgot about how the mixes sound, how the remixes sounded, and after listening to these original mixes, even though I can remember, in some ways my memory has now blocked how the remixes sound. My memory has blocked the remixes out of my mind. So now just so basically here to now finally talk about and give my thoughts on this album, since I went through again. It's a pretty good journey with at least this one, because I'm now able to at least give my perfect honest opinion on this album. And what I can just tell you again, if you hadn't paid attention to my emotion or my voice throughout this entire video here, or this entire review or whatever, it should at least give you a good indicator that how I very much feel about this album. To me, this is this is a good debut album. Again, I don't with those remixes, I don't any of the listener that was new to them, I don't think ever got a good idea on how underrated Frank Beard is as a drummer. Because a lot of people, when it comes to a lot of these reviews, or anybody that gets into at least music, most of the time when it comes to at least the rock-based genres or the guitar-based, it's always about the guitars. But Frank Beard has to be one of the most underrated drummers. Because on this album, and any of the other albums after this one, let it be Rio Grande Mud and Tres Hembros and Fandango, and even Teos, and to some extent to Deguelo, he definitely can just go. He just jams a lot with this album right here, and there are times I'm wondering if he's using a prototypical double bass, because he just has a oral assault to his drumming. He just, and along with the other band, he just adds another element to at least this one, where it just sounds like the band is just kicking ass in the studio. And he's just definitely one of the most underrated parts of this band. I mean, Billy Gibbons is already a pretty good guitar player in his own right, where I definitely can, I think he's definitely worthy of being considered one of the best guitar players. I mean, it's too bad that even a lot of these rock journalists, or these guitar journalists that write for like classic rock magazine or fucking Rolling Stone, don't even put would not put the late Leslie West probably up to, or at least next to Billy Gibbons, because these two just have a similar vibe to them. They just definitely, it's not fancy, but that's the way it was for at least this time period, and for what they're able to do. They just add a whole lot of character, and they were definitely some of the two guitar players that knew how to add character besides Tony Iommi. So that's why I think I definitely put Billy Gibbons in that category of just great guitar players, and bluesy, but it works. And it works for this album, and he just has a character of his own. There's just plenty of great songs. I love Brown Sugar. That's probably some of the hardest rockin' tracks, I would say, on this album. And even for ZZ Top in general, of any other song. It rocks hard for at least 1971. That definitely laid the foundation for at least the later period of at least the hard rock genre. Because it's just a rocker from beginning to end. But there's plenty of great tracks. Neighbor Neighbor, Certified Blues, Bedroom Thing, Backdoor Love Affair. This is great fucking rockers on this album. They definitely know how to at least jam in a studio and make it sound like a goddamn jam session, instead of just sounding like, oh yeah, we're just in the studio, we're just a bunch of studio tracks. Not like that. This one, it just sounds absolutely authentic. And that's it's what's great about listening to this. It's like, it just sounds like again, just a bunch of three guys in the studio just having fun and just kicking it. That's the way it sounds, and that's the way you're supposed to hear albums like this. You're not supposed to listen to it and expect a bunch of studio mastery. You're expecting to hear a band who obviously just wants to pick up their instruments and play. That's what you sound, but at the same time, they mean business. They mean serious business, though at the same time. And that's probably what you also got with their live shows. So that's, again, I can say that because I have seen ZZ Top live, though much later in their period. And they barely played a whole lot of stuff off their earlier albums. Though nowadays, I think they probably do pull out at least some of their earlier stuff now. Because again, just great stuff on here. Again, also Dusty Hill, who was definitely also known for adding vocals, does add some vocals to Going Down to Mexico. And again, great stuff, and does some duet, of course, trades off singing with Billy Gibbons on Skank. Just great stuff. Just a solid album from beginning to end. So again, one of the bands that is just dear to my heart. So I definitely like these bands just as much as any other classic 70s band. So yeah, just great stuff. I don't really get tired of listening to this album. Really, I just don't have any. I just don't get tired. Again, I listened to it again before recording this, and it still sounds fresh. It's a great album. So, again, this album has reached its 50th anniversary. And for any of those who hasn't at least heard this album, what can I say? If you're into at least just straight up classic heavy blues rock, or just good blues rock in general, or just like good guitar-driven rock from the early 70s, I think that this album would definitely do good. But if you haven't even heard at least some of these early ZZ Top albums to begin with, I definitely would recommend checking them out. But if you haven't heard this album in years, and since it has reached its 50th anniversary, and after listening to this, if you feel inspired to re-pull it out, go ahead, re-pull it out. I think it's definitely worth a listen here and there again. I think it's a good album. I definitely like pulling this album out once in a while when I'm in the mood. I really do. And again, it definitely satisfies me to the very end. It just satisfies me. It's a good album. So again, it's reached its 50th anniversary. That's just amazing. 50 years, and it still is a good album. So with that, I hope all of you enjoyed. If you have any thoughts on this album anyways, leave them in the comments section below. So until then, I hope you all enjoyed. Next week, I'll be back with a much more heavy hitter, a classic new wave of British heavy metal heavy hitter. So with that, I hope all have enjoyed. This is for Thrasher Sam out. I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.